Welcome to Mice Tech Talk with the technical information scientists of the Jackson Laboratory. My name is Caitlin, and my job as a technical information scientist is to serve the research community by answering all of your mouse-related research questions. Mice Tech Talk is a way for us to connect with all the research community and to answer some of those mouse-related questions live. So today I'm here with my colleague Larry, who has tons of experience working with tamoxifen. He works with Steve Murray in the Cre characterization group, and he's been working with Jackson for over 23 years. So congratulations on that, Larry.
Thanks, Caitlin.
So hopefully you're ready with your questions because it's time for Mice Tech Talk. So today, let's talk tamoxifen. So we've prepared a few discussion topics, but for those of you who are watching live, you can use the comment section of the video to tell us where you're tuning in from and to ask any tamoxifen-related questions that you have, and we'll try to answer those for you today. So let's start with one of the most popular questions that customers often have, and that is, where do I find a good tamoxifen protocol and how do I get started?
Yeah, hi, Caitlin. So a good source for the protocol is actually on the video link. I believe it's the first link, and it will give you a IP interperitoneal administration tamoxifen administration protocol, and a starting dose, and some other considerations. So that's the good place to start. That's where you could get, a general good starting point protocol. The other part of your question is fairly in depth. I've reduced the considerations for tamoxifen dosing to about 4 different general categories, and one of a good resource to obviously to look at for tamoxifen dosing is you've decided on what your gene of interest is, obviously, and you're looking for a cre mouse, to excise your flox allele or your other reporter or whatever you're trying to do with your cre mouse. And a good place to start is the MGI informatics recombinase page. There may be a mouse already available if you haven't chosen one. And that can be found at www.informatics.jax.org. And on that site, you'll see a recombinase tab. And you can there's a query button where you can enter your gene of interest, your driver, if you will, of interest. And within that site, you'll be able to see some data, if there is some data that exists for recombinase. And if not, the primary reference, there may not be any data, but there may be a primary reference that the donating investigator has shared that describes the method they used for their tamoxifen induction, and other considerations that they took. At any rate, so the other thing again is to look for other references other than, so you start with MGI, you look for a primary reference, and then you look for other references that may be available through PubMed or whatnot. And to do that, and to kind of, instead of recreating the wheel, you could probably do yourself a favor by looking to see if some of this work has already been done. And if this is a novel mouse that you've just made, then it's a good idea to start your dosing scheme. I would say at 70 milligrams per gram body weight is a dose that we use as a starting dose. We haven't seen any toxicity at this dose. And you could take your mouse and try a dose range all the way up to, say, 200 milligrams per kilogram body weight. And so the other thing is to maybe take your Cre driver for a test drive. So if there's no validation information available for this particular driver, then you'll have to, I think it's recommended to take your driver and cross it with a reporter strain. We use the Rosa 26 Phlox Laxi reporter, but there are others out there, obviously. But to try and just to confirm that your specificity and the existence of off-target recombination doesn't exist. And then finally, to use a no drug control to control for leakiness of the tamoxifen, to make sure that this is truly an inducible line and there isn't already some sort of constitutive Cre that's confounding your results, which would obviously affect your lineage tracing efforts. So that was a lot right there. Sorry, it's kind of verbose, but I try to nail it down to 4 different topics. But I think that the take home is to look to see what's available, what's been done. If not, then to look at a reporter and try different dosing titration, if you will, to see where your hotspot is as far as recombination.
Great. So this sort of leads me into the next couple questions that I have for you. So I think there is sort of a big debate out there about route of administration of tamoxifen. So I feel like people are always arguing between oral gavage or intraperitoneal injection as their route of administration. So what has your experience been with administering tamoxifen, and what can you tell our viewers?
My experience with using intraperitoneal injections over gavage is that they're comparable. I prefer to use gavage, and in fact, the Cre characterization pipeline that we have here for select lines is exclusively by gavage now. And the reason I do that is because even though they're comparable, I've done a head-to-head study with a driver for MyH6 as well as the ubiquitin, and the 2 methods are fairly comparable, more or less within error. And the reason that I was concerned for IP injection was site of entry. Some people are better at IP injections than others. I'm fairly decent at gavage, and mice don't regurgitate. So you're going to get your dose administered to the mouse fairly certainly. But for IP, my concern was if you had, for example, there are circumstances where it could be a little difficult. And one would be with an obese mouse. You're trying to find the interperitoneal cavity with an obese mice. You might hit a fat pad, and I don't know what injection into a fat pad, how that would actually be a problem, but it was a potential concern. And the other was with say late gestation embryos or a late gestation pregnant mouse that for say E15-5 and on. Where the IP cavity might be a little bit tough to reach, and I don't know how it would be confounding if you injected directly into the embryos. So that was really its route of entry for ease of use and concerns over injection site with IP.
So now that we've covered a little bit about the route of administration, what can you tell us about the different doses of tamoxifen, and how do I pick a dose, and what if I give too much?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of empiricism involved, and that's a tough word to throw out there, but I think from what I've read in the literature and what was established before me in Steve Murray's lab through Caleb Hefner, who did a lot of this initial work, um, um, is the 70 milligrams per kilogram body weight dose seems effective for most lines. And so I would say that as far as dosing is concerned, to start there, that's common throughout the literature. The question would be, how far do you want to go up from there? And the maximum dose I've ever used is 300 milligrams per kilogram body weight, which is a pretty large dose. And I wonder if that is truly necessary. And it may be a point of toxicity that happens when you get too high. So I would suggest that the 70 to say 150 or 200 milligrams per kilogram body weight. And to do a dose titration curve, if you will, using several mice. There are the issue of toxicity is probably the biggest concern with overdosing of tamoxifen. And it can happen in embryos, and pregnant females have been known to spontaneously abort or have hemorrhage as a result of overdosing. And that might be a line-specific thing that may be dependent upon copy number or site of insertion. Because I've had lines that could tolerate a fairly high dose, and then some that don't. So that's another example of where you really want to start low, and balance your phenotype or your recombination. If it's a laxi signal, if it's a beta gal signal, balance that with obviously with any toxicity that might occur.
Okay. We actually just had a question come in from Martin, and they are asking about storing tamoxifen long-term in a vehicle. So they said, such as ethanol that could subsequently be mixed with corn oil. And so they were just wondering if that was possible. So is that something that you do? Or what can you tell us?
What I tell you is it's not something I do. We make up our tamoxifen fresh. There's some concern with light sensitivity to light, Martin, for that molecule. So you want to be careful of that. With that said, there are plenty of people I've talked to that actually make stocks of this material using ethanol to dissolve it in, and then migrating from there to adding the corn oil and getting a suspension. I feel that it's best just to make it fresh if you can. For us, there's no advantage to having stocks because the powder in the powdered form stored appropriately would probably be the best storage of this material that you could get. And so to make it fresh would be my advice, although others have. And so that's what I do. I make it fresh per dose, per dosing.
Sure.
Yeah.
And back when I used to work with tamoxifen back in grad school, we were poor, and so we would freeze our tamoxifen. We would make it up and then store it in the -20 freezer for, I don't know, up to 6 months maybe, but just put it in the corn oil and freeze it. So it's definitely doable, but if you can get away with it, I always think using fresh is better too. Yeah. Let's see here. We have another question from Anna, and they wanted to know, they tried a 300 milligram per kilogram IP dose and had mortality of around 60%. And they want to know if you tried that concentration with oral gavage.
I have, and I've had it both with success and I've also observed toxicity. So of course, with the care of these mice, you want to kind of keep a close watch on them when you're dosing, and obviously, as you know, uh, uh, make steps immediately if you have any issues. Um, but yes, I really believe that it's line dependent,
Mm-hmm.
and again, whether or not that's because of insertion site or copy number or something else, I'm not sure. But some lines tolerate a higher dose, and I've had success with 300 milligrams per kilogram body weight, and I've had instances where I've had to actually scale back. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I guess again it's empirical. So that's why I would err on the side of caution and start low and go
Right.
high if you're new to this, or find a nice mid spot, 150 milligrams per kilogram body weight, and
Mm-hmm.
go from there. Because I know we all want to get the result as quickly as we can, as cheaply as we can, and the idea of just using a big dose, I feel you may, and I can't ascribe a percentage to it, but my experience is it does happen. So maybe 150 milligrams per kilogram body weight would be an appropriate mid type dose to
Mm-hmm.
use.
All right. Well, we are actually already past our 15 minutes, but I did want to get one last question in for you. And so, with all of your experience working with tamoxifen inducible models, what's your biggest piece of advice for our viewers who are wanting to work with a system?
Yeah, outside of dosing, and looking for your references and to see how the crew driver of interest for you has functioned, would be to take your crew driver for a test drive, if you will, to get a reporter and to cross it with that reporter, and using the Rosalac Z, for example, or a fluorescent reporter of your interest, of your preference, to try to confirm what it is. Um,
Hmm.
what what your specificity looks like, what your signal strength looks like, and what off-target staining looks like. Um, I did actually want to, if I could, just go back to Martin's question
Sure.
regarding the suspension. Martin, so we actually use a technique or method, if you will, to suspend our tamoxifen, and we use a glass scintillation vial suspended from protected from light on a hot plate that does not exceed 37 degrees, and we spin using a mini stir bar. This is a technique someone gave me, and it works pretty well. So within 2 hours, you can get a fairly decent suspension of your tamoxifen and corn oil, and that's been pretty effective, and it obviates the need for the ethanol. But if you are making stocks up, you should be able to freeze those as well. Should be fairly homogeneous, and you could dispense them. I just want to add that it
Great.
obviates the need for the ethanol step. But okay,
Yeah,
yep,
one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up on is another viewer asked if Jax can administer tamoxifen to our lines before we ship. And that's something we could absolutely do through a custom project. And if that's something that you're interested in, you can email MiceTech, that's MICE at jax.org. You can also send an email if we weren't able to get to your questions. I know there were a couple questions about diphtheria, toxin, and tamoxifen. I personally don't have any experience with that. And Larry, I'm not sure if you do either.
no,
But that's something that we can address at our micetech@jax.org email address with our other technical information scientists. So like I said, if you didn't get your question answered, please feel free to shoot us an email. Like I said, we've also linked a few resources in the video description for you to take a look at. And our next Mice Tech Talk episode is called Let's Talk Knock-In Mouse Models, which will be next Tuesday, September 15th at 1 p.m., same time. So we look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn and YouTube next week. And this is Caitlin saying, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay excited about research. Bye.